G'day everyone, it's Sam. In today's practice, we're going to be working on one of my favorite arm balancing transitions, the crow to handstand. So this one is so fun because not only does it require a lot of strength and control of your body and your breath, but it's one of the few transitions where we're moving from a bent arm to straight arm position. So the entire structure of the shoulder girdle and the strength in the arms changes. So in this video, we'll run through my favorite progressions to help build the strength to get into this transition, and then little tips and tricks that can make this a little less tedious and a little more fun. So when you're ready, all you'll need is your yoga mat and we'll get right into it. Alrighty, if you did watch that little intro, you know exactly why we're here. Today we're working on the transition from crow to handstand. So before we start this video, if you could do me a favor and just like the video and also subscribe to the channel, it really helps to grow the channel, and we are working to get towards 1,000 subscribers so I can do a giveaway and give one of you a nice, beautiful gift. So, all that being said, the transition from crow to handstand is an absolute doozy because we are moving from a bent arm to straight arm position. So the structure of the shoulder girdle changes, the shape of the arms changes, so the stability changes completely. So if you think of a very, very common transition we do in the yoga practice is from crow pose back to chaturanga. And if you're still working on your crow pose or you're still working on your handstand, then we're probably not ready to put the two together. So I do have a video on how to nail your crow pose, and I also have a video with my top tips to hold a handstand. So I'll put them somewhere at the top of the video or in the description below. So look out for those, and if you're still working on the crow or the handstand, you can click to watch those videos, work through that, and when you're ready, come back to this one. So when we've got our crow pose nailed and we want to work that first transition from crow back to chaturanga, the movement can become quite jerky, meaning the legs can fling back at warp speed and you don't find any real lift by lifting the legs up and off the arms. And what I mean by that, if I'm coming into my crow pose, I've been here for a few seconds, I've finally got it nailed, but it's my first time working the transition back to chaturanga. It'll probably look a little bit something like this. The legs will just fling back as fast as they can, and then the body wants to flop right down onto the floor because we don't have that lift. And that lift of getting the knees off the back of the arms is the first step for the crow up to handstand. So we'll get to the lift in just a little bit. Before that, I'm going to run you through just my two favorite strength building exercises to help you gain the strength in the arms and shoulders that's required for the crow to handstand. So obviously we're moving from that bent arm to straight arm position. And what does this shape resemble? It's a push-up, essentially. But because in the transition our hips are quite a lot higher than they would be in a normal push-up, we're going to work on a pike push up. So if you take yourself into the shape of a downward facing dog, but then walk your feet just a few steps closer. So the hips are really, really high, and you come up nice and high on the toes. Then shifting the gaze forward between the hands. So we're going to shuffle the hands just a touch wider than the shoulders, just a touch wider. And then turn those index fingers so they're facing towards the top corners of the mat. So the space between the thumb and the index finger is pointing straight ahead. Now, to maneuver our way through the pike push-up, we're going to lift the heels as we take a breath in. And on the exhale, we bend the elbows, wrap the biceps forward, triceps back, lower the forehead to the earth, and then push yourself back up and lower your heels back down. So unlike a regular push-up you would perhaps do in the gym or your normal workout routine, the elbows are not falling out towards the side because that doesn't resemble what they're doing in a crow pose. So as we lift the heels, we wrap the bicep forward. So when we bend the elbows are pointing straight back behind us. So if you were
working on your strength building routine and the crow to handstand was a transition that you'd want to work on, you'd probably make your way through about 6 to 8 reps of those pike push-ups for around 3 to 4 sets. Really working on pressing through the base of the thumb, the index finger, wrapping the biceps forward, sending the elbows straight back. So if you're looking for some progressions to put into your strength building routine, the pike push-ups, around 6 to 8 reps for around 3 to 4 sets. And already after one set, I can feel my triceps burning. So write that down, pop it on your list of things to do to get towards this transition. And then we'll move on to the second exercise, which is just as much fun. There's just as much burn going on. And these are the dolphin push-ups. So from downward facing dog shape, you can take it a little wider this time. So instead of the feet being super close towards the hands, you walk them back. So there's a little more length in your downward facing dog. And it's the same principles. On the inhale, we'll lift the heels nice and high. And the exhale, we'll bend the elbows to lower the elbows down towards the floor. And just like we did, we're going to wrap the biceps forward so that when we bend the elbows, they're pointing straight back behind you rather than falling out towards the side. So you can keep the gaze between your hands. Same thing, push down through that space between the thumb and the index finger. Inhale, lift the heels nice and high. Exhale, bend the elbows to lower the forearms down. And then press straight back up. Same time if you can, rather than one elbow then the next. I know that's going to be a lot easier, but once again, it doesn't really help us with the transition we're working on. So if you're doing this in your strength building routine, once again, around 6 to 8 reps for 3 to 4 sets. Inhale, we lift the heels. Exhale, we lower the forearm and lift. So after a while, if you keep that weight through the inner part of your palm, you can smash out the reps, as many as you like. Really working to build the strength in the triceps and the stabilization in the shoulders, because those two things help us more than anything in this transition. The strength, the pressing strength of the triceps, and the stabilization in the shoulders. So they would be the top, or my top 2 strength progressions to help get you towards this transition. And the first functional transition that will help you on your way to crow to handstand is that transition from crow pose back to chaturanga, trying to find an element of lift. And if you're not quite comfortable with the lift, then springing the legs back is probably not your best bet. So one thing that I like to teach my students is, if we're learning to find a little bit of lift from the crow pose, just get comfortable lifting your knees off the arms and lowering your knees to the floor as slow as you can. So what I mean by that, if I'm coming into my crow pose, I look forward, lean forward, hover the feet up off the mat, squeeze the heels in towards the butt. Now, all I'm going to do is work to lift the knees off the arms and very slowly lower the knees down towards the mat. And if you could see there, you probably see the arms starting to shake, the legs starting to shake, because it requires a lot of stability to draw the knees in nice and close and slowly lower down. So I'm not running through too much the alignment of the crow pose or the handstand in this practice. This is assuming that you've got those 2 poses nailed. So we're just working those functional movements that will help us with the transition. So again, if you want to put this in your strength building routine, this is one you can probably practice for around 10 reps, working to really slow it down. So from your crow, lean forward, lift the feet, squeeze the heels to butt, pull the knees off the arms, and slowly lower down. And maybe when you start, it looks a little more like this. Knees pull off, and you fall quite quickly. But after a while, you work to lean the shoulders forward just a touch. Really pull the knees in towards the chest, and slowly, after a while, the movement starts to get a little more fluid. And once you're used to that idea of finding that element of float,
That transition from crow pose back to chaturanga can start to move in slow motion. So instead of flinging the legs back at 1,000 miles a minute, we want to work to slow the transition down. So think about doing your pike push-up, doing that slow lower of knees down towards the floor, and taking the legs back at the same time. So in the pike push-up, we were lifting the hips nice and high, bending the elbows were pointing back behind us, the chest was lowering down. In that slow lower, where we took the knees off the back of the arms, we were working to draw the knees in towards the chest and squeeze the heels in towards the butt and almost levitate. So if we put those two things together, we find our crow pose, lift the feet. So the chest will start to lower slightly, the knees will draw in, we'll hover the feet, and slowly extend the legs back behind us. So we lean forward first, we pick up the knee second, and then the legs move. And that is very, very important for the crow to handstand. We lean forward first, we lift the knees second, and then we move the legs. We'll do that one more time. So from crow pose, we lean forward first, lift the knees second, and move the legs third. And why that's very important is because, like we mentioned at the very start of practice, when you're first starting these transitions, they're very, very jerky, and the legs move first. The legs are a lot heavier than the arms. If the legs are moving first at warp speed, then the stability from your foundation, which in this practice is the arms and the shoulder girdle, it loses a lot of its stability because the heaviest part of the body, the legs, are flinging and moving as fast as they can. So we want the legs to be the last thing to shift in this transition. So when we make our way from crow to handstand, we lean the shoulders forward first, we pick the knees off the arms second, and then we work to lift the legs. The one piece we're adding into this mix is we're moving from that bent arm to straight arm position. So you want to think about your arms moving first before your legs. Arms moving first before your legs. So if I was to demonstrate the transition, and then we'll run through a little bit of the nooks and crannies afterwards. Shoulders lean forward first, knees lift, straighten the arms, and then lift the legs. So the arms move first to lift up, and then to lower back down, the legs move first. Knees draw to chest, shoulders move forward, we bend the elbows, and return the knees back to where they came from. So, important to move from the arms first when we're lifting up, and then the legs first when we're lowering back down. So, a few things to work on there. Shoulders leaning forward first, knees lifting second, work to press to straighten the arms, and then lift the legs. Last piece of the puzzle. So, work towards putting all these progressions together, and then try and nail that crow to handstand. And if you have any questions or it's just not working for you, feel free to leave some comments down below, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much. And once again, if you could, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all again soon. Peace.